Welcome to another episode of Coder Conversation. Today we have Dagna Bieda here, career coach, and she's going to walk us through her software journey to her present coaching gig. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Dagna?
First of all, thanks for having me, Kevin. Super pumped to be here. And I'm glad how you started because, yes, I've been a software engineer and I've transitioned to being a career coach. So I like to say that I'm the I've been in your shoes kind of coach
Hmm.
that shares tough love with my clients. And, my clients have various backgrounds. They are working from anywhere from small companies to FAN companies in terms of experience, anywhere from 2 to 20 years of experience, and education ranging from like being a self-taught developer or bootcamp grad or traditional college grad or someone with a PhD. So what I do with my clients is really help them reach for their potential. So thanks for having me on your show, Kevin.
Oh yeah, definitely glad to have you. I know you have a lot of experience to help, other devs, and you have a very interesting story. So, can you tell us how you got started in software?
Yeah, absolutely. So I studied control engineering and robotics, and I even have like little robots on my shirt today for this interview because I'm talking about my own journey. And
Hmm.
when I was a teenager, I was just really thinking about what it is that I want to do in the future. And something that came to my mind was I want to create the future, whatever that means, right? For a
Hmm.
teenager. And so the most futuristic thing that I could find to do was actually building robots. So I started studying robotics, and the funniest thing ever is when I was studying back in Poland, you have like very set curriculum. You have all these classes that you have to take, and you don't really have that many options, right?
Hmm.
Or that many electives. And so I had to have programming classes, and I absolutely hated coding back when I was studying, but I learned to love it in my very first programming job. I learned to love it because I started working with people who had way more experience than I did, and they really taught me what it was about. Right. So in college, there's this kind of mindset of having a tough, maybe like scientific problem that you have to solve
Hmm.
using algorithms, and you have to create this program that solves a complex problem, and nobody cares if your code is maintainable because after the semester ends they're just going to throw it away, right? Nobody's going to ever see
Hmm.
that code ever again. And then whenever you move into programming in the industry, you start realizing that what's important is actually creating maintainable code, right? Something
Hmm.
that other people can come into, take over, and you may no longer be there in like 3 or 4 years. So it's really key to like have this different kind of mindset. And that really showed me how shifting mindset is key for being successful, right? And whether that's falling
Hmm.
in love with something or just changing how you do things or um, figuring out how to uh, be more efficient or effective. It's really a lot about perspective a lot of the time.
Hmm. Yeah. So, can you tell us about some of the companies that you worked at and some of the things that you enjoy doing there?
Yeah. So in terms of the companies that I worked for, I started in a corporate environment, right? And it was a
Hmm.
really great place to get started with because of that access that I mentioned a moment ago, where was working with other people who had way more experience than I did.
Hmm.
And, when I compared myself being on a team with the senior engineers to like all junior teams, I've grown in a matter of months really quickly. And the people who are old junior teams were still kind of figuring things out, kind of blind leading blind in a way, if you will.
Uh-huh.
um, and I had the opportunity to learn and grow very quickly. However,
Mm.
I noticed that there were a lot of people who had a lot of experience and have stayed in their corporate jobs. you know it's so comfortable. At a certain point it works to your detriment, I feel like, because you kind of get lazy. You know what is expected of you, how to deliver, how to be good, and what it is that I do, what you do in your job. And what I wanted early in my career was this rapid growth. So I moved on and
Mm.
I started working later on for an agency. Before that, I actually worked for a robotics company that was building robots, but that turned
Oh
out to be
wow.
like a very slow process. And building a mobile app, deploying it to the app store, and having it at the fingertips of millions of people felt so much more impactful. So I made that shift from robotics to being a software engineer. And in terms of other companies that I worked for as well was um, the corporate environment, the the agency consulting company that with multiple different clients. So I had a lot of opportunities for growth there as well because I got to work with multiple different clients, multiple different
Hmm.
tech stacks. It showed me that sometimes you might be working on an incredibly interesting project with a super boring tech stack, and it still might be fun, right? So, like, how to
Hmm.
look for what motivates you in terms of what you want to do out of a job. And then the last company that I worked for was a startup that grew. That was a very successful startup. At the time that I worked there, it went from I think 50 people when I started to like 300 something people when I decided to pursue career coaching full
Hmm.
time. And right now, that's what I do. I'm an entrepreneur, and I coach software engineers who have been going through that similar journey that I've been going through.
Do you find
Yeah,
it?
oh,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Do you find that your like your approach to coaching software engineers, is it always are there a set uh, I guess, is there a model for coaching software engineers, or is it a different approach with each individual?
Great question, Yannick. So I do have a specific program that I take my clients through, and I've worked with over 50 people at this point because I've been coaching for over 3+ years right now. And so essentially, a lot of the program that I was able to develop as I was working with my clients is also based on the issues that I faced in my career, right? So when I was growing in my career as an engineer, I went from junior to senior relatively quickly, like 2 years and something, right? It was all because dumb luck in a way, because I had access to all these incredible mentors who were willing to share the knowledge with me. And I was really hungry for feedback. So I always would ask, hey, what else do I need to know? Hey, do you think that I did good? Hey, what is it that I'm missing to get to that next level, to get to that next step? And they were gracious enough and, they had the awareness or the knowledge that they wanted to share with me and gave me that feedback that helped me grow. And I realized that a lot of people don't really have that kind of experience, right? You may not be in an environment that is supportive in giving you the feedback that you may need, but might be tough to deliver. Or you may not be aware that you need to ask because a lot of my clients also are immigrants, either grew up in immigrant families or immigrate to United States, and the culture that you grew up in affects how you think. And
Hmm.
so that has a big impact on how do you expect to grow in your career, how do you expect to be guided. And for a lot of my clients, what I like to do is that I move from programming to computers to reprogramming human minds. Because what I do with my
Hmm.
clients is really dive deep into their own belief systems, into what might be stopping them, into like why is it that they act the way they do, and then we kind of debug that and reprogram their mindset for success. So in terms of like a specific process, yes, I do have a specific process, and it starts with the looking into that internal baggage that you bring to your career and figuring out what is it in your past experiences that may be holding you back at this point in time, right?
Sure. So yeah, can you? I know like most of it's reserved for your coaching, but can you tell us like a couple of the things that, couple of mistakes that developers make during their career that could really fast track them if they fix it?
Yeah. So the first thing is understanding priorities, right? Whenever
Mm-hmm.
you start working for a business, the business essentially made an investment in you as a software engineer, as a developer, in order to achieve a business objective. It might be bringing more money in, retaining clients, keeping the clients happy, or allowing the company to not spend as much money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really key to having a perspective of whatever I'm doing as an engineer, as a software developer, as a person who interacts with code every single day, is to make sure that I am keeping those company objectives in the back of my mind. So the company made a good investment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a clear example from my own career. There were these two tasks that I was working on. One of them was super intellectually stimulating, and it was so much fun for me to work on. It was essentially kind of rewriting a piece of our app, how it was being built, right? So the build time at that point in time was taking 5 minutes and something, which is not terribly horrible, but I mean, it's super boring if you make one liner change and then you have to wait 5 minutes for the application to rebuild, right? So I refactored that. The build time ended up going down to like 20 something seconds. I was so proud of myself, right? It was a huge achievement in my mind. And guess what? Nobody cared.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then the next week, what happened is I got a task where I needed to essentially follow kind of like a step by step process, kind of copy pasting, setting something up for like one of the clients, one of the bigger clients, it turns out, that brought massive revenue into the company. So even though the
Mm-hmm.
second task were super boring and I really wasn't motivated at all, everybody from the client rep to the sales rep through to my manager, their manager, was saying, "Hey, Dagna, that was an amazing job because you made a client happy." Right. And it's an
Mm-hmm.
important client and it's really key. So that helped me understand, okay, if I want to be successful, if I want to grow in my career, that sometimes means doing things that are boring and are not fun or intellectually stimulating, which I feel like a lot of engineers tend to like go into that rabbit hole of trying to figure a problem out, right? Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because we get that dopamine hit, right? You solve a problem and it feels like, yes, I want to solve another problem. Let's do that, right? But if you're like
Mm-hmm.
copy pasting things and just setting things up, it's configuration, it's like boring. And I think most of developers get into coding because it feels like an artistic pursuit, right? You get to be creative, you get to solve problems, you get to impact people, and that's fun. So we tend to prioritize what's fun, and what's fun is not always good for what's good in the terms of growing your career, right? So prioritization is like a biggest one of the biggest things. The second thing is in terms of growth, a lot of growth happens on the inside, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can be following leadership principles that Amazon recently released, and follow them to a T, and not realize that there's something in your mindset and your way of thinking that's going to contradict those principles, right? And until you get that critical piece of feedback, you might be stuck. For myself, moving from Poland to United States was a really interesting experience, and
Mm-hmm.
that taught me a lot of things. And that also kept me stuck in my senior software engineer position for a few years, because as an immigrant growing up in Poland, my communication style is very much different from the American communication style.
Mm-hmm.
So I would get feedback telling me, Dagna, sometimes you sound a little bit too direct. Maybe you're too harsh. Maybe you're too blunt. You got to kind of think about it. And I didn't really realize that that was kind of like an obstacle until a specific situation in my company, in that successful startup that I mentioned that grew significantly. What happened was, unfortunately, at one point in time, they had to lay off some people, and we had this meeting, kind of like all hands on deck, company-wide meeting, addressing the situation, explaining why people had to be let go, and they did a great job explaining it. But I thought that maybe they haven't really thought through how letting a lot of engineers go would impact my everyday job. So I kind of stood up, speaked up, and the next day, my boss's boss comes to me and he's like, Dagna, why did you call our leadership team a bunch of idiots in a company-wide meeting? And I'm like, I, I didn't say that. That's not what I meant. Well, that's how it came across, right? So
Mm.
I realized that a lot of the time for engineers who are having good intentions in their hearts, because we don't have communication skills, we're not taught to communicate assertively, we may come across as harsh, as just total assholes, for the lack of a better word here,
Mm.
right? And that's something that happened to me. And if it wasn't for that piece of critical feedback, I would still probably not be aware of that.
So yeah, how do you avoid like taking the feedback personally? I know like sometimes when we receive feedback, we take it personally, but that's the only way to grow.
No, it's not. I mean, a lot of the growth has to happen on the inside, and a lot of things might sound kind of offensive or like
Mm.
might be attacking our ego. And, a lot of it is growth, internal growth, letting things go, and, understanding that it might sting in the moment, but assuming
Yeah.
that the person had the best intentions, right? Or creating a safe space for yourself, which is essentially requesting that feedback, right? So if you set the
Hmm.
stage, you tell the person, hey, I really care about your feedback. How am I doing on the communications front, right? You
Hmm.
are opening yourself up for receiving that feedback instead of feeling like you're maybe attacked, in a moment. And a lot of the time you'll notice, um, that's also the reason why I call myself a tough love coach, is that I tell my clients things that their manager would likely not tell them, right? In a company
Hmm.
setting, because it might sound a little bit too harsh, too offensive, and they don't want to offend people, right? They want to create a good work environment where everybody feels valued and can contribute. And so sometimes giving feedback that would enable you to grow goes against that.
Exactly. So yeah, so you came from Poland, correct, to America, and you talked about there's a lot of cultural differences. Like, what were some of the strategies you used to adapt to America and
So it was a
American
lot of
selling?
trial. It was a lot of trial and error at the very beginning. And with time, I discovered certain tools. So, like right now, there's this specific tool called Hofstede model. And essentially, it has a tool that has a specific comparison where you can plug and play different countries. So you don't have to be an immigrant in the United States. You can be an American working in France, for example. And in order for you to understand a little bit better how those cultures differ, you can plug in these two countries and see how they are compared on 6 different dimensions, right? So
Hmm.
that's one of the specific tools that I use with my clients. And the second one is having that experience of myself going through this journey and then helping many other clients go through that. As a coach, I'm able to provide that feedback and tell them, hey, you're doing great. But for example, my recent client, um, felt like he was doing everything that needed to be done, that was expected of him, but he was never too proactive, right? He was
Hmm.
expected to be told what to do. And in an American workplace that is highly individualistic, as you can see in the HOT model, it essentially is required for you. It's assumed that you're going to be proactive if you want to be successful, right? So for someone like myself or a lot of my clients coming from Asian cultures, for example, it's more of a collectivistic culture where, and I had that example myself as well, where I proposed an idea at work and everybody agreed that we should do it. So what I thought was going to happen was that we all who agreed are going to work together on that
Hmm.
initiative. Now, in my American workplace, it was assumed Dagna proposed the idea, and Dagna now should be the leader for this idea and be the proactive person who's responsible for this idea to actually be implemented. And that was like some disconnect there. I didn't take action because I thought we will all take action. And then nobody else took action because they thought I will take action. So, there are those little miscommunications here and there if you are growing up in a different cultural mindset. And that's something that we analyze as we work together.
Yeah, so I'm half Asian, so I definitely understand where you're coming from with the collectivism and kind of
Right?
waiting to be told what to do. And in an
Exactly.
American workplace, you can't really just sit around and wait for your boss, to tell you because they think you're lazy or incompetent. So you have to, go out and kind of set the agenda. Like, how do you coach somebody who's used to being reactive to be more proactive?
First, we realize where the reactivity comes from, right? So, early in the coaching, as we go through the process, essentially we tackle the limiting beliefs that you may have. There's 6 specific ones that I discuss with my clients, and we analyze them one by one, which one might be related to your specific situation. So for a lot of people, have this limiting belief that's related to fear of becoming visible, right? And it might
Mm,
be due to growing up in a cultural setting where it's just better not to stand out of your line, just kind of like stand in line with everybody else. But it could be an event of how you grew up in your household, right? Like, let's say if you're the only male and you grew up with 7 sisters, it might be intimidating to, stand up and speak up for yourself, right?
mhm,
And so we dive deeper. Where is this coming from and how we can shift that perspective? So we again go back to like analyzing what's your internal mental programming, how it was created, and, if we had Git with our thoughts, we would just run Git blame to see like what situation
mhm,
really contributed to that particular line of code being there. And then we refactor, right? And debug and try to shift the perspective, see things from a different perspective, have a different approach. A lot of the time, I like to say that human beings in general work on an autopilot, right? We grew up with certain systems and beliefs, and we just, most of the things that we do, and we act the way we do because of how we think. So if we can change how we think, we can change how we act and change the results that we see around us. And essentially having that understanding of how the autopilot is running allows to make that change, right? But the
mhm,
first thing that needs to happen is to become aware. Like with my example of, supposedly calling the leadership team a bunch of idiots. I did not say that, but that's how it came across. And I would
mhm,
not ever have been aware of that situation if someone didn't give me that feedback. So awareness is the first step. The moment you know something's a problem, something's an obstacle, something's holding you back, you can take the steps to change it, right? And I think something that really differentiates my coaching and my approach from anything that's out there is that we really go deep, right? There's this belief,
mhm,
this kind of belief that for a person to change, you need a lot of time, which is not true. All you need in order to change how you act and therefore, well, change how you think and therefore change how you act and have different kinds of results in your life is by having one aha moment, right? So in the coaching that I have in the process as we go through, we really are working towards getting as many aha moments as possible so we can rewire your thinking, reprogram, debug, make sure it's optimized for whatever it is that you're trying to achieve in your career and in your life. Because, I mean, career is a huge part of life.
mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How different is it to coach someone who's seasoned, like a senior dev, as opposed to a junior dev that doesn't have a lot of bad habits already?
It depends. Everybody has some habits and some baggage, so it really depends, right? But in terms of what I work with more junior and more senior clients, with more junior clients, it's typically imposter syndrome, right? figuring out how to gather the courage in order to speak up, in order to ask questions, in order to ask for feedback. So that's typically the topics that we're focusing on within the process and within the framework that I provide. With more senior developers, it's really understanding the perspective of what it is that they're trying to do, right? Because for a lot of senior engineers, they hit that plateau and nobody is telling them what is it that they're doing wrong. And a lot of the time it's the people skills, the communication skills, the
Mhm.
business acumen. So understanding that they're a piece of the business machine and they're there to support the business rather than just doing some fun software related things. And sometimes it's tackling burnout, right? Because I mean, it's kind of interesting looking at the developer's journey. Whenever you're growing, how does the growth look like at the very beginning? Well, what you do is you learn how to code, right? So you kind of put technology on that pedestal, and then you maybe learn C, C++, Java, then Python, then JavaScript, React, and Ruby, because you want to know all these languages, right? So you're getting more and
Mhm.
more technical. But what happens is we tend to forget, and it's not really part of our education. We kind of learn this haphazardly, just working in our careers, that we create software with other people and for other people, right? So people skills and being able to effectively collaborate, to communicate, to set boundaries, set expectations, and make sure that you have the right mindset are really critical here. So these are the things that I address mostly with my more senior clients.
So, I know a lot of people in the coding world, they're kind of introverts. So, like, if somebody's kind of nervous, how do you help them like work on their social skills, like the soft skills?
I recently had this client, and I loved the results that he was able to get as we were working together. He told me that he experienced 80% of reduction in his anxiety in social situations, and that included
Mm,
just talking to people. And we were working on it in terms of the work environment context, but he could see that the effect propagating in his social circles, like at church, or just, it became much easier making friends for him. And one thing that he told me, which was really incredible to hear, and that is really that mindset shift that happened, that internal mental reprogramming that we did together, was he told me, Dagna, I think I was pushing them away before.
mm,
Now I allow people to open up and talk about themselves, and I'm friendly and I want to be with them and they can feel that energy. So now, they open up, they stay in those conversations. And previously, he was telling me they would just kind of, people would walk away awkwardly, and like it was really difficult for him to make those social connections, right? So if someone is listening to this podcast, to this live stream at this point in time, and they're feeling that social anxiety, the question is, where's it coming from? And a lot of the time, it comes from what we believe about ourselves, right? So, for example, you're afraid to speak up because what will people think? Will they see me as a idiot because I asked this dumb question? Maybe it's better not to ask that question, right? The way we evolved as human beings is to essentially be able to survive, and survival means avoiding dangerous situations. So if
mm,
our mind perceives speaking up, stepping up, reaching out with a question as a dangerous situation, our subconscious is going to do everything that it can to talk us out of taking action. So either we're going to overthink it or totally procrastinate on that task, right? And I see that with, for example, a lot of more junior folks who do experience anxiety that's related to the imposter syndrome, which is essentially, procrastinating on asking someone for help and trying to figure out everything by themselves. So that's like one classic example. And it really comes from that perception of the situation being dangerous, right? And that's something that we dive deeper in the coaching.
sure. Can you tell us about like some of the best results that you've gotten for clients? Like, say, this guy went from 75,000 to 150,000 a year later, or you know.
Yeah, so I've had a client who, excuse me, as a result of us working together, went from underappreciated senior engineer to a startup CTO, which for him was at the point that we started working together was something out of reach. And
Mm,
within literally 3.5 months, he was able to get into that position. For him, dream come true. I had another client who was a senior engineer at his company, much smaller company, and he was able to, within 3 months of us working together, get a skip level promotion. And he became, because of the company growing at the time and him being smart about his connections and leveraging and being clear what it is that he wanted from his career, he went from a senior engineer to a VP of engineering and innovation at his company. I had another client who had a military background who shifted into tech, and he had this belief that he had to kind of work step by step and very slowly work the ladder up. The moment that
mm,
we open his mind up for the possibilities, and that he can really go after the opportunities that are out there instead of working his way up slowly, he was able to double his salary. So he went from I think 110 to like 220 plus a bonus signing package, right, within the time that we worked together. And now he's on his way to become a team lead, which is super
mm,
awesome because that's something that he really cared about at that point in time. Uh, the client that I mentioned that experienced a reduction in anxiety by 80%, his own words, not mine. That's these are some examples, and the results really depend on whenever someone comes to me to work with me, what do they want, right? And
mhm.
we are using the process and diving deep into using the process towards their specific goals that they want to achieve as we work together.
Sure.
What if what if what if someone comes to you and they don't quite know what or where they want to go in the industry? For probably
Yeah,
from
getting clear is
yeah.
also something that I work on with my clients, right? And for some people, that's realizing that they didn't really want that FANG job. They only wanted it because of the social pressure, right? And they are really um, feeling fulfilled whenever they're working for a startup. So that's also something that I work on with my clients, getting clear what it is that you want to do and what brings you fulfillment. And a lot of career coaches focus on either landing your next job or increasing your salary. What I focus on is really increasing the fulfillment that you have out of your job, and that way you get more motivation, you get more energy, you get more creative, you see more opportunities opening up for you. And the moment you have that energy and that foundation and that understanding, our coaching builds like a foundation for the future success in your life, really. It's not just that next job, it's not just increasing your salary, it's figuring out how that change affecting literally the rest of your life and the quality of your life.
Yeah, that's good. So any clients that have moved from engineering into something else that doesn't require coding or maybe a lot of coding, I guess a team lead would be that, but like product or Scrum Master or something like that.
Yeah, so typically it's moving up, being like a team lead or being a staff engineer, for example, right? So, in terms of moving completely away, um, I haven't had that many experiences.
Would the approach be the same if someone wanted to maybe transition out of engineering and go into
Absolutely, because the principles are essentially the same. So actually, I do have some clients who did move away, but not into a different role, but they moved away in order to build their own company, right? And so some of the skills that we work on, the people skills, communication, being really clear, also planning, which I didn't mention before, but planning is also something that we use on. These skills also help with the entrepreneurial journey, right? So these have been some examples.
So, what does a coaching session with you typically look like? Like, how does somebody reach out to you, and then once they reach out to you, where does it go from there?
So typically, the way that working with me looks like is we go to get on a call. It's a strategy call, and we have a conversation on what is it that you're dealing with right now. What are the biggest obstacles? What is it that you're trying to get help with, right? I want to make sure that I work with people who I can help and who are also committed to making that change and putting the work in, right? I've had early on some clients who had purchased my coaching and thought, okay, I paid, so now I should see results, right? And it's like with the gym membership. If you just have the gym membership, nothing's gonna happen. You gotta show up, you gotta do the work, right?
Mm,
And
yeah.
so whenever we have that initial strategy call, I want to make sure that we're a good fit. And if we're a good fit, I invite people to enroll in my coaching program. At this point in time, it takes my clients anywhere from 2 to 4 months to complete. It's 6 specific steps that we take together. We have 6 one-on-one calls, and there's a little bit of pre-recorded content. So that's kind of like a hybrid approach, but it gives you the best of both worlds, right? On one hand, you get to go through the content that is like literally 15-minute to 20-minute videos that give you also a little bit of homework and reflection to do. So that way, whenever we dive into a feedback session, the one-on-one session, it's really deep, on point, and gives you a lot of insight into what is it that is very likely holding you back. We have 6 of those sessions. In those sessions, we focus on exactly what it is that you want to focus on with that topic in mind that was part of the um, content modules. But because I want to make sure that my clients get the best out of the coaching, we really dive into what it is uniquely and specifically able to help them, right? The kind of feedback. And then after the 6 sessions, a lot of my clients, either continue and just keep working on the skills and the habits we've been working on over our coaching meetings, or they choose to extend the coaching packages and work with me long term, right? So it's either or. I'm always happy to support my clients for longer period of time. And for example, the one that did double his salary and is on his way to being a team lead, we have we've had a Voxer support, which is kind of like a walkie-talkie app where we talk on a daily basis, Monday through Friday, as well as quarterly meetings where we would make sure we plan the next quarter and it's really clear for him what are the objectives to achieve, right? Having clarity on what is it that you need in order to get to that next level is just gold, because you can be
Mm,
pulled and distracted in like multiple different directions. But the moment you are clear on what you want, why you want it, why is it important, and you have that energy and motivation stemming from either the job aligning with your values or doing something that you really care about and that really drives you, um, that's when you're able to really execute effectively, right?
mm-hmm.
Here's another thing that I feel like is unique about the coaching services I provide. The moment we get into that internal mental programming, we're really able to see where the inaction is coming from, the overwhelm, the procrastination. Because at the end of the day, if you want to see any kind of results in any domain of your life, you got to take action, right? You want to lose weight, gotta hit the gym and maybe get a diet, right? That requires action. Just thinking about it, right? Or thinking about starting tomorrow is not going to change a lot, right?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, just to make your coaching a little more tangible, say for example, a lot of junior developers are having a really tough time getting into the industry. So like, what are a couple of things that you would tell them to help them improve their chances of getting that first job?
So I typically work with people who've had a few years of experience, but I would
Okay.
say that the most important thing whenever you're starting your career, regardless of your background, regardless of the domain, regardless of anything, is having that belief that you can figure this out.
Mhm.
because I remember when I started coding, and the reason why I hated coding in college is because it was so big and complicated and daunting. There was a very steep learning curve. And there were nights when I cried myself to a pillow and I thought I was the dumbest person in the world because my code
Mhm.
wouldn't compile, right?
Mhm.
And so having that belief that you can figure it out and you're just learning, so you're going to accept that it's tough, but you're going to get there, that is the key mindset piece to being successful in the software engineering industry.
And not just
Yeah, I agree.
software, for sure. I mean,
Not just software.
yeah, that's so
Mm-hmm.
important that we miss it all the time. I do have a question about your history. I was going through
Yeah,
your
go ahead.
profile. I was looking at all the things you've done in the past, and they're all engineering related. Now, I know experience is probably the greatest teacher we have, but have you done anything else to kind of um, educate yourself and teach yourself about people and our behaviors and how to deal with people and help people in this way? Maybe some books
Yeah,
that you.
absolutely. Yannick, I love that question. So essentially, big part of what I'm using in my coaching is actually something that I've learned in therapy. So I'm a mom, and when I was pregnant with my second child, what happened was I experienced postpartum depression. And I was really, a lot of things kind of like added up. It wasn't just the postpartum depression, but that was the moment when I finally thought, okay, you know what? I need a professional to help me out with this. And so I went out, seek help, had a therapist. She was phenomenal. So what I had, because I was pregnant at the time, I only did like talk therapy, but it helped me so much. It's just incredible because she named my issues, looking from, that outsider perspective. She told me, Dagna, definitely you got to work on your communication skills. You got to, you have this superwoman complex and you're just trying to do too much. And, being an immigrant, well, she didn't say it in those particular words, but, there are those cultural differences that are really key in how you communicate, and that's something that you need to work on. Plus we dove into my childhood, my relationship with my parents, how I grew up with my siblings, and that was incredible. The moment I wrapped up my therapy, and the moment, actually, let me rewind that. The moment my therapist was able to name my problems, I would educate myself. I would get books, I would start reading, I would reflect on it. I would always come back to my therapist, to the therapy sessions with like a list of things that I wanted to discuss and like a list of ahas that I got because I researched the topic, right? So I was totally open. I wanted to make sure that she would help me get past my uh, this horrible situation I was in, and I was very motivated to give her all the information I could in order for her to help me pull myself out of that situation. And it did help tremendously. So the moment I got out of my therapy sessions, they helped me tremendously. But I realized the value of what naming your issues and having that awareness and having unbiased third party perspective that has experience working with similar people, similar problems, similar backgrounds is just tremendous. So I thought that, everyone should go to therapy, regardless if they're a parent or not, because it was so valuable and so helpful. And, you know, it was just life changing. So I'm using a lot what I learned there in my coaching. I'm using what I learned in my own senior software engineer journey and the moment that I was stuck, right, with my communication, with my immigrant background, not understanding what are the priorities in the American workplace that could help me be successful when I was working, for a different set of priorities that came from my cultural background, how I was raised, and what I thought was important instead of what my workplace prioritized and thought was important. And that challenged me in many ways, so I had to grow personally, and that personal growth is has informed the process that I use today, right? So in a lot of ways I walked my talk right? And I use the things that, first of all, worked for me and now are also working for my clients with the results that I mentioned a moment ago. So it is a powerful process, and it goes back to, you know, to the awareness of your thoughts, of how you think, what is it that you believe, because all you do stems from that internal mental programming. So that's part of, what informs how I coach, what really impacted how I coach. The second thing is I heavily invested in my education as a coach, and I did probably most of the courses that are available out there on how to be a successful coach, right? I also have a business coach that I work with that helps coach me with my business, helps me understand what are the things that I need to focus on, what are the distractions, and having that clarity really helps me execute. And I've invested over $100,000 in my education in order to become a successful coach. And I can see fruits of that in my clients' results, getting amazing results, and me just feeling super fulfilled and happy just hearing about their progress. I mean, there's something really cool about creating a feature or solving a bug, but it's like very temporary. The fulfillment that I get from helping other people find their fulfillment in life is just incredible. So that's a huge motivation for me to just keep on going and keep coaching.
Yeah, it's an amazing feeling. Really helping people is like my number one thing, my number one passion for sure. Um, I want to ask a question. So obviously you're a woman, right? And uh, recent times, I've not been in the technology industry long enough to know about when you started, but I know recently there's been a lot of effort behind getting more women into tech, and I'm honestly speaking, some of the best engineers I know are actually female. So, um, do you find it like uniquely, I don't know, satisfying when you help a woman, as opposed to like, I mean, I guess the approach is the same. There's a lot of commonality regarding the approach to whether it's a man or a woman. But I mean, what are some unique things about working with women, and I don't know about your own history coming up as a woman in the technology industry.
So I would say that I actually mostly work with male clients. I think it's just representative of the tech industry in general. And I also find that whenever I'm having conversations with men or women in that strategy call that I mentioned earlier, that's kind of like, assessing whether or not people want to work with me. For a lot of women, the blocker is that they are not willing to invest themselves at the rate that their male counterparts are, right? And that's part of, you know, how we're raised, that superwoman complex. I feel like so many ambitious women in tech and even outside of tech face that problem where we're trying to do it all by ourselves, right? Because that's how we are raised, that we're supposed to do it all, right? We're supposed to now have a great career, be fantastic mothers, great wives, fabulous friends, daughters, and sisters. And it's just a lot of pressure that is, even more exaggerated by the internal self talk that we have, right? So, in terms of the clients that I work with, typically they're male, and typically they're of like I said, immigrant background, right? So either they're immigrant themselves or they grew up in immigrant families. And I think for a lot of people, the reason that they come to me and want to work with me, it's either because of having that similar path, understanding what it means to be a minority in tech. And being an immigrant a lot of the time does mean that you're a minority, whether you're male or female. And I guess my energy also attracts them, right? But I wish for all the ladies listening out there to this particular podcast, give yourself permission to invest in yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And whether that's working with me or somebody else, you're worth it, girl. I mean, come on. Guys don't seem to have that problem.
Yeah, I definitely agree that a lot of people, especially in the programming industry, they have that I can do it myself attitude. I'm a self learner. I don't need coaching. I don't need a mentor. I could just go look it up myself. But the reality is, you're going to save so much time, so much money if you get the proper coaching, the proper instructional materials. So, can you kind of like elaborate on that? Like, what are the big benefits of just getting coaching?
So the reason why I got coaching for myself, and a lot of people get coaching, whatever kind of coaching it is, it's essentially that it's a shortcut in a way. It's a ramp. It's something that accelerates you to get from point A to point B, right? And instead of you figuring it out and having like this crazy route that you don't know is going to actually lead you there, the moment you work with someone who's been there, who helped other people get from that point A to B, it becomes more of a straight line. A lot of the time it's not like super straight, but working with a coach makes it way more easier to have that clarity and be able to execute on exactly what it is that you need to work on, right? For myself specifically, I had seen how much difference having someone who would tell me this is what you need to work on, this is your weak spots, this is something that you need to know in order to advance to that next level. That's what accelerated me, and I went from junior to senior software engineer in like 2 years and a few months, right? And I wanted exact same thing when I made the decision, okay, I'm moving from software engineering to being a career coach for software engineers. I want to learn from people who know exactly what it means to be a successful coach, who know exactly how to best help my clients. And so working with a coach, what it does is it helps you get into that mindset, that proper mindset of what it means to be successful and where you want to be, how to think like that person, how to become that person, how to make sure you're not wasting your precious mental energy on worrying about something that's totally not relevant, or you putting your time even into things that aren't relevant, right? So
Mhm.
it really helps with making sure you're laser focused, you're doing what needs to be done, and you're getting to that next level for yourself and as soon as possible. And I mean, put it this way, at this point in time, I've had over 10 years of experience just coding, right? I've had over 3 years of experience of programming. And the moment someone works with me, they get all that experience of mine plus all the clients I've worked with across domains, across cultures, across, you know, different backgrounds and different um, mindsets. And they get all that on a silver platter. I mean,
Mhm.
Uh,
you know, that really helps to accelerate.
yeah. So I do have a question about scaling. I know you said we earlier. Do you have a team that you work with?
So at this point in time, like I mentioned, I have my business coach that helps me set my business goals and objectives. I have my lawyer, and I have like a occasional help here and there, but at this point in time, it's mostly me. So if someone, for example, signs up to work with my coaching program, they get 100% of me. There's no other program coaches, no other people involved at this point in time, and we work together 101.
Yeah. Do you ever put content out there? Have you ever thought about writing any books or anything like that to kind of like
Yeah.
reach more people?
So actually, Yannick, that's going to be my effort next year. That's something that I'm really preparing for, planning to do, writing a book and being able to, help people just through even reading that book, right? So I definitely want to do that. The one thing, and I love reading books. I love, the idea of being a published author and being able to touch more lives with what I have to say about my mindset and how to be successful as an engineer, right? Without all that imposter syndrome, like how to leave that behind as soon as possible. And the only thing that's different about books or even self-study courses and coaching, in coaching, you get that feedback. right? That no book or self-study course would ever give you. And that feedback is what can really make the difference in your growth.
Yeah. So you very much prefer to do it one on one.
So the reason I currently have a one-on-one program is because a lot of the times we get deep. We get um, vulnerable, and it's important to have that safe space for people to share things that they probably would not have shared in like a community setting of people that they don't necessarily know, that might be working for their next employer or their past employer or have some connections in common. So having that work one-on-one at this point in time gives us that safe space to really dive deep and really untangle what is it that is holding you back, right? Um, Hopefully, in the future, I'm able to scale it more and have enroll more people, but also, have a bigger team, impact more lives. I mean, that's the goal. But for now, I am sticking to the one-on-one because the effects of that are just so profound.
Is your process suited for I don't know, corporate training? What if a company wants you to uh, help some of
That's a
their
great question. So, in terms of company setting, I do have a mindset training that I actually rolled out in the last software engineering gig that I had, where I trained the 20 something engineers that went through that mindset training, and it was fun to do, right? It wasn't as profound. And something that I think is a game changer in terms of like for me working with a company would be to focus on making sure that that company has a culture that can really help accelerate growth and promote like a feedback culture, right? But at the same time, on one hand, you need the company buy-in, so you need to have that kind of leadership mindset where um, you know the company culture is for everybody to grow. But on the other hand, you have to have the individual's buy-in, right? Because if someone is coming to a training and they just want to, I don't know, take off the hour or whatever, or tell their manager they did the job, they're not going to get value out of it, right? So, for example, sometimes people come to me and say and ask me like, "Hey, can I gift your coaching to someone?" And I said no, because for a client of mine to really see results, they need to put the work in. I can give you my whole
Mhm.
process, all my knowledge, all the tools that I'm using. If you're not going to put in the work, you're not going to see results.
right.
As simple as
Yeah.
that, right?
It's the same with the therapist too. The therapist helps you to get to that point where you do the work to get yourself into a better place.
Exactly. You have to have that courage to face whatever it is that's deep inside you, right? And how to shift that thinking into something that can actually help you out, live a better life.
Where can people go? Is it just the mindfuldev.com? Where can people go to see some of, well, not necessarily see your work? They can just come directly to you. But where can people go to know more about you other than LinkedIn?
I absolutely love to connect on LinkedIn, and that's the primary source where I'm hanging out at right now. So, anyone listening, if you're curious about the coaching process, how it looks like step by step, I do have a link in my description that, can take you there. And if you're anything like me, it is a video case study where I describe the process, really lay it out and explain how it goes. But you can definitely play it on 2x. That I know that's something that I love to do in order to make
Mhm.
sure that I'm effective and efficient with my time. Listen on 2x, but it's really kind of showing off how the process looks like. So it's at themindfuldev.com/podcast, and that's how you're going to get to the page that will kind of walk you through the process that I used with my clients. Other than that, I also send out a newsletter email once a week. So entering the case study, entering your email, what it does, it adds you to that newsletter. Super easy to opt out if it's kind of boring. I am striving to deliver my best content. A lot of it is derived from the work that I'm doing with my current clients. So there's a lot of kind of like being able to see what's possible, for other people, and then using it as a proof for you as the newsletter reader to be able to accomplish whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, right? So newsletter is the second place. LinkedIn is my place number one, and my website, themindfuldev.com.
So y'all know we're approaching the hour. We don't want to hold you too long. We definitely appreciate you coming through. Did you have any closing thoughts for the audience?
Yes. So first of all, Kevin, Yannick, thank you so much for having me. It was a blast sharing all that. I loved your questions. I loved that to have the opportunity to share how my journey looked like, how my process looks like. And, I think that with the COVID pandemic and how it completely kind of changed how we work and how we start to question the assumptions that we have about work, about life, about work-life balance and how we do things, and allowed us to be a little bit more brave with the decisions that we take in terms of where we work, how we work. I think that the leaders of tomorrow, because of those changes that happened through COVID and increase in the mental health awareness, the leaders of tomorrow in tech are going to be the people who are looking inside, who are resolving their internal baggage. And whether that's working through therapy or working with someone like me, a coach, if you want to go up, move up, and be successful, then it's really key to look inside and figure out what is it that might be holding you back.
Absolutely. We definitely appreciate you coming on. If you ever want to come back on, let us know. We'd love to have you back. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll catch y'all next time. Peace.